County teacher Jim Pickett retired back in 2011, but work to pursue his lifelong dream had only just begun.
So over the last 10 years, he has researched, written, and now finished a trilogy on Fort Wayne's violent origin story. His series, The Bones of Kikiyonga, The March to Kikiyonga, and published this year, The Siege of Kikiyonga. The stories follow his own created characters, among familiar names like Generals Josiah Harmer and Mad Anthony Wayne, Chief Little Turtle, and even Johnny Appleseed himself, through 1790 to 1812, as the old Northwest Territory is settled by Americans. In a story that's really more fact than fiction, Pickett hopes his books will bring awareness to the history that goes pretty much unnoticed every day in a much different 21 country.
This is our heritage, this is our history. Good or bad, it's what happened.
From the 7 Pillars in Miami County to Hanging Rock in LeGros, to subtle reminders in Fort Wayne's downtown and alongside the 3 rivers, the setting of the Kikiyonga trilogy is very real.
I didn't want it to be a history book, just giving a bunch of facts. I wanted it to be a story, an adventure story.
Battles between the Miami tribe and General Josiah Harmer took place on the Maumee River, near what's now the Lakeside neighborhood.
Watching a newsreel like this really reminds me of how the mainstream media has been used to solidify the narrative they want us to believe about the past. And in much the same way that a Hollywood movie serves to overlay history with a new narrative, this series of books by this gentleman, who I don't presume has any ill intentions toward anyone, but presenting a fictionalized story of history, it becomes fact in the minds of the readers. And you can see that with the perspective of the news anchor in this video here, where he, at the very end of this clip, praises this man as being the utmost authority on history.
Tract was the commander of and named after Anthony Wayne.
Made of wood and dirt, the original Fort Wayne was replaced and moved when Commander John Hunt took over.
And this particular well was inside the fort in sort of the northwest corner of the fort. And it's significant because it helped put out the fire during the 1812 siege of Fort Wayne. This was in a lot of use at that time.
That well, the site of Fire Station Number 1, which is what we depend on now to put out the fires of today.
This is also the site of the 3rd American fort, which was built by Whistler. His fort is now a replica over on Spy Run Avenue, the one you want to go to see what that looked like in 1812.
Pickett's characters, E.J., Bobby Fulton, Uncle Isaac, and Running Deer, are immersed in our history, describing the fighting as it unfolds, offering perspectives from both the Americans and the natives. An idea from childhood, a labor of love, finally finished.
I never dreamt there was going to be 1 book, let alone 3. So yeah, I just love this spot right here that we're standing. There's just so much that happened here, and just looking into what the Lakeside neighborhood looks like today, you can just let your imagination go. It's just pretty cool.
Now that's a guy who knows his history.
So Fort Wayne, Indiana, the second most populous city in the state of Indiana. Here we have it up here, getting close to the Great Lakes. Modern day population demographics, just under 300,000. We go back to the turn of the 20th century, we're looking at 45,000, not a lot. We're going to see some photographs from this area here, where 20 to 30,000 people live there. And we begin this exploration with some solid evidence of the fort narrative from the 1700s, similar to what we saw in the intro. But we're going to be focusing on the structures that are a little more well built than the old wooden forts and the replicas of the old wooden forts. And we're going to be questioning, of course, the official narrative that tells us, well, you saw the intro. Here we have an early look at Fort Wayne with the streetcar narrative, of course, in full effect. And you have all of this going on here with the flagless poles, or the Antiquitech poles, the wonderful courthouse that we'll be taking a closer look at, the second courthouse, and of course a couple of old world bangers along this stretch of road. And let's look at the streets and the curb work here at this early time period, and of course the size of the buildings. All these things need to be taken into account when we consider that we are likely looking at a false historical narrative. This photograph is supposedly taken in 1889, when the population of Fort Wayne is about 30,000 people. Now what do we see? We see a lot of residential houses in 1889, multi-storied. We see also trees on the lots, looking like they've been there a while, and likely planted, possibly, as a part of the property. We also see these multi-storied brick structures. And this would be the old courthouse, which we'll be taking a closer look at as we move forward. A nice looking church in the foreground, 1889. What do you think? Do you think this place was more developed than they're letting on? So what I suggest in this field of research is that we are living under a false historical timeline. And our timeline has been shortened, and you get these stories, those fort narrative stories and those wars, really to cement a beginning to these locations in our consciousness. That there was a beginning and it started like this, and then eventually, as they say in the intro, the Americans took over and developed. And that's history, as they say. Now I wonder, as we look at some of these industrial structures, with this one with the tower, the repurposing of these buildings, that seems to be so widespread throughout my research. You have to wonder what they were originally for, or did they have the same purpose, but were they overtaken by the inheritors? Nevertheless, we are seeing signs of age in Fort Wayne with these types of structures, looking very old, the brick and stonework here. And you really have to allow your mind to entertain the possibility that these are older than we've been told, and they, in many cases, several hundred years older, possibly, than what we've been told. Wonderful markets were a part of the old world. And now, can you envision modern day markets, including these type of arched structures? It just seems like so much overkill for the narrative we've been given. Another early photograph. This is in the 1900s for sure. This one, I believe it's the Liberty Tower. We will see it in this presentation. Almost looking like, giving me that Eye of Sauron feel, like an overlooking the old world structures around it. Overtaking, maybe. But we'll see more of that. And as I always like to say, if you're looking at a postcard, it's likely that I was unable to find a photograph for you of that specific structure, like this one here, Fort Wayne Club. We have the Elks Temple, gentlemen's clubs everywhere, of course. And you can take a look along the side here and see the lower windows as well. I had a comment recently on a video saying, well, why is it such a big deal that these structures had basements at that time? Of course, they needed to let the light in. My rationale on that is this is something that just exacerbates the entire build process to the point where it doesn't make sense if you're building a temple like this to excavate so much further down and have that lower level. It's according to the technology we had at the time, it's not a practical process to have undertaken. It would make much more sense if they were just going to put a flat platform at grade and build upward, because of the means they had at the time, or were told they had. So it's another one of those hints that that we're dealing with a false timeline. And that whole mud flood narrative has seeped in as a part of the hypothesis, as well as there were regrading going on. I'm not sure exactly what happened there. I know there was a cataclysm, as far as I'm concerned with my research, but I can't really say any of this for sure, right? It's all speculation. But the point is something does not fit with the narrative that they've given us. And we can let our minds wander from there, and we can put our heads together. But we look at something like this, for instance, the church and the library hall in the foreground, they call it. Does it really make sense for them to have these kind of structures in Fort Wayne? Again, at a time when there's less than 50,000 people. Absolutely incredible architecture. And no doubt they'll tell us it was the European immigrants that brought their home flair with them, but I think we know better in this research, and I think that's just a thin veil, a weak cover story. We have Baptist Church postcard supposedly highlighting the building, but trees shrouding the building. You'd think if it was a postcard, you would make sure that the foliage was not there so you could actually capture the building. See that very often as well. And we're looking at a very grainy First Methodist church here in Fort Wayne. No shortage of churches in this small city at that time. And of course the churches all come with pipe organs. No matter the denomination, they all seem to have the same setup. So it's another one of those things that should be ringing alarm bells. Why so similar? Because my suggestion is that these are repurposed structures. So many of these had bell towers, had pipe organs, the sound frequency, healing, even just balancing of society, a part of the old world, is the hypothesis. And it makes sense when we look at these structures. Here's a New World church, just to give you a sense of contrast with the old world churches. This is what we can do. This is even an attempt to mimic or mock the old structure. What do you think? Is it a mockery? The old St. Mary's Catholic Church. 3 towers, because why not? Apparently this one burned down in the 90s. We have a modern photograph of it. It just seemed like it would have been so easy for these guys to throw churches up. Doesn't matter where you look, really, either. Here's some footage of the steeple coming down. Photograph of the interior before it burned down. And sort of a grainy photograph of that fire. Apologies for the quality of the photo, but I hope you get the point. St. Paul Church, not to be outdone. Also St. Paul's. Apparently, this is from a fire in 1903, we are told. You can see the roof is gone and the wooden portion of the tower is gone. And apparently, they rebuilt these portions because it still stands. This is what it looks like today. I don't know. What do you think? It's almost identical. Either it's a perfect reproduction post-fire, or there's some interesting historical augmentation going on. Not sure. Beautiful looking church though, nonetheless, St. Paul's. St. Peter's, another church, not the same. Let's take a look at the quality of architecture. Look at the 6 columns over the entry door. And just to hammer it home too, here's an attempt of the St. Vincent de Paul Catholic Church in the modern day. Here's an attempt to make it look like the old world structures. You have the arch windows even, and an attempt at some sort of dome structure, but cannot hold a candle to what we're seeing with these structures here. Here's an interior look at this St. Peter's Church. Looking a lot like the St. Mary's Church that burned as well. We're going to keep going. Trinity Evangelical, possibly modern, but I don't know. It's got that copper top. And it's got the gargoyles. Possibly heavily modified, not sure. Another church, don't even have the name for that one. And there we see again, so many of these churches. There's the Baptist church with the leaves removed from the trees, so you can actually see the two towers and the splendor of the church itself. But we'll move on to the City Hall. This is a classic old worlder with the Richardsonian Romanesque styling, heavy stone architecture and arched column entryways. And of course the lower story windows, and check out the depth of the stonework here. And the poor horse had to do so much of the hauling of the materials. You can also see the interwoven brick and rail car lines on the streets, all par for the course in the old world research. And you might be wondering, what are the implications of such a suggestion to say that the historical narrative that we have been taught about these locations is inaccurate? Well, the implication is that there is so much more to our history than we have been told. There's so much more depth to our character, to our ability. Here's the modern City Hall. This one still stands, obviously, but you can tell it's being used as a history center. Yeah, that's the difference. And then we have the courthouse. Apparently a 5-year build time on this sucker. Certainly looking like it has been standing for quite some time. Take a look at the statue work all around here. I mean, if you're one of these folks, what do you actually think? And like, what I wonder about history, I think it has evolved. Our historical narrative has changed down through time. It's very likely and possible that these individuals at this time believed this to be an older structure. And it's just something that has been modified. You come down through the 20th century with the depopulation agendas of the wars and the education system and the brainwashing institutions of the invention of the radio and movies and TV. And over time, our history has been altered. That's what I suspect has been going on here. So I don't necessarily think that everybody that we're seeing in these old photos were as clueless as we are about how deep history is. I think there had to be a process going on there. This is the old courthouse that we saw in that early photograph from 1889. And now I suspect both of these were standing at the same time and had different purposes. It almost looks like a photograph, but I think or a drawing, sorry. I think it is a photograph or a combination. Hard to tell. This part looks kind of drawn. Bit of a lighthouse look to it as well. Jumping back to the modern courthouse and the paintings that can be found here. They must have had a local artist with or they brought in an artist. But why are you painting all this in a courthouse in Fort Wayne, Indiana? And decorating it as such? Now it's likely that a lot of the writing has been altered, but I suspect this type of detailing is all coming out of the old world. And different explanations have been overlaid over the symbology or symbolism that we're seeing in the old structures. Absolutely breathtaking architecture, and it doesn't surprise me anymore. It doesn't matter where I look. But maybe if you're somewhat new to this research, maybe you are surprised at what you're seeing. But it is important for us to understand that this is all over the continent and across into the other continents of the realm, which I promise I will begin covering. I want to look off continent a little bit more just to show you the architecture there as well. Here's a part of the horse-drawn streetcar narrative that was in full effect. They say here that everything was pulled by horses until electricity in 1891. They just quickly transferred over the technology to electricity. Now, where were they pulling all this electricity from, you wonder? Well, here we have a dam that, again, they'll say all of this was built in that same time frame, but I wonder if all of this infrastructure, and I believe all of this infrastructure has been modified and overhauled from the old world. The State Home for the Feeble-Minded. We'll be looking at this a little closer as we move forward. No shortage of these types of institutions in the 1800s as well. That's really got to give you pause for thought what was going on at that time. Here's the old fire department, looking better than the fire department that we saw in the modern day. This one still stands. You can see what they've done to it. Choppity chop. Take the bell tower off. Remove the bell, take the bell tower off, pretend it never happened. But it's still a magnificent looking structure. Very well built. The General Electric plant. Very nice looking ornamented brick building, several stories tall, very large. And this going back again to that whole electricity thing. I would really like to know more about technology in the 1800s and what was going on, the repurposing of technology. The whole Edison, Tesla thing, even the Ben Franklin thing with the kite is absolutely absurd. That's at the point now where I think we can really throw it out, because it's such a comical. It's like Columbus sailing the ocean blue. You know, here's the old firefighters from the early 1900s. A hospital, multi-storied brick hospital, beautiful. Okay, this is a Hotel Avalon, 1908. I should jump to this one first. This is before it was burned down, 1889, early time period again. So who's building these structures in the 1880s? Or if this photograph is from 89, how old is this? Is this building 40 years old at the time? Is it 2 years old? You have to wonder. And given that technology at the time was in its infancy as far as the Industrial Revolution goes, the Second Industrial Revolution, the fact that we don't have power tools, we don't have the means to move a lot of this material to this location, you really have to wonder how these things were going up so quickly at the time. And of course the hotel burns down in 1908. This would be the aftermath of the fire. Probably had a spectacular interior. Hotel Indiana, nice looking structure. Might be New World. It has a bit of an Art Deco flair or somewhere along those lines, but I don't know. It still carries a lot of the weight of the architecture we expect to see with the stone balconies. And also had a theater, which we'll be taking a closer look at as we move forward. The Wayne Hotel. I did find a photograph. Here it is. Again, early time period for this one. Would love to have a date as well, but take a look at the detailing. Again, why would you want to put this almost a fence line, this gate line up along the top, or guardrail? You know, very ornate and very frivolous, and way over the top for the narrative that we're told from that early time period. Public library, probably thanks to Carnegie. I'm speculating, but we know Carnegie was involved with several thousand libraries at the turn of the century. Apparently he's donating to have them built. My suggestion is he's donating to make sure the books in the libraries are the books that they want the people to know about. And this sort of goes back to that. This is a Lincoln Bank Tower right here that I was talking about earlier, looking like the Eye of Sauron almost. And this is the courthouse. It's almost like this is overshadowing the old courthouse. Like there's a new world, old world feel to what's going on here. That's the impression I get with that. The Lincoln National Life Insurance Building. There's a look at it with its very prominent columns. This is a look at the people around it in the 30s, I believe. Gives you a sense of the size, having a very heavy government feel here as well. There's your Eye of Sauron, Lincoln Tower by night. And you can see how it towers over much of the city around it. Like almost like a conquering has gone on. And Sauron goes in, and Mordor turns to smoke and ash. Usual suspects. Interesting how they're side by side. Very interesting. Interesting looking structures, for sure. Scottish Rite Cathedral. And apparently this one's not here. Remember how much alteration can be done with these postcards and photographs. Postcards especially are easy to obscure, but photographs as well. They certainly had the ability to alter what we're seeing in these photographs. So don't take anything at face value, really, when you're seeing these landscapes and cityscapes. This is the Scottish Rite, apparently in the modern day, giving you that Islamic feel. There's a little close-up of that entryway. Interesting. I wonder who this is supposed to be. And double-headed. Well, is that an eagle? I don't know what that is. What it's supposed to be. But you get your symbolism in your 32 here in the floor. There's the Masonic Temple in the modern day. Scottish Rite Temple's long gone. Seen several of these as well. Very similar looking buildings throughout the States. And this one pops up as a very obscure temple and theater. Only evidence I could find of this thing ever standing. Apparently that's the predecessor, so make of that what you will. Alright, let's go down the orphan's home rabbit hole, because all of these locations seem to have many multi-storied structures with bell towers dedicated to raising orphans, because there was such a large amount of them at the time. Very interesting. And this again lends credence to the repopulation that was going on and the re-education. Of course, it's easy to educate an orphan who has no parental influence, because it's really the parents that pass down what they know. And if you don't have any parents, then you are at the mercy of the state or the church to get your perception of the world in those formative years. And this is interesting, the 25th anniversary of the orphanage, 1908. So if you turn the clocks back, you're looking at the mid-1880s, when there was about 30,000 people, we are told, in Fort Wayne, when this place kicks off. Apparently these are two of the superintendent and the matron from 1883 to 1899. These are the two that kick it off, John and Mrs. Rettig. Just as a quick addendum to the orphanage here in Fort Wayne, I found this on wayne.com, W-A-N-E. The link will be in the description. Apparently there's a renovation that went on where the old orphanage was. Notice here they mentioned that they had tunnels. And they mentioned here 1886, the construction year. It's interesting because we had 1883 on the start date for this, and it was mostly for young girls. Of course, you can take some time to read the entire article. Notice here, though, former orphan reflects on underground tunnels. Over 300 feet of tunnels underground connect the buildings to one another. The nuns who cared for the children at the orphanage would use the tunnels when the weather was so bad that they did not have to walk across campus in the elements. Some tunnels large enough to walk around and some too small to stand up. Orphans would spend time playing down here or hiding from the nuns. So there you have it again, the underground peeks out from below the surface, just letting us know that there's much more going on down below. I'm sure they're lovely people. What do you think? This is interesting as well. I'll read this out for you. This looks like an advertisement for people to come get orphans. Dearest friend, my name is Rob. They call me Bob and say I wear a booster. I cannot walk and cannot talk, but sing like a rooster. And Papa said that you had paid for our little paper. How far you paid, that will be said by your address on wrapper. Thanks. Thanks to you. Best wishes to, and mind you are invited to come and see. It's all and me, us all and me, and we shall be delighted. Is this an advertisement for people to come get orphans? I think so. And I guess they're just building all these in. You've seen how many structures there were in the 1880s. These were also up in 1883. We're told. Who's doing all the construction? And looking like an early photograph of our matron and superintendent. Interesting, to say the least. I love these old photographs of the police and fire from that early narrative with the heavy brick and stone in the background, and the brick paved streets. I also find it very telling that the limited technology available to these gentlemen contrasted with the heaviness and the enormity of the structures in the background. And then we have the post office, the Fort Wayne Post Office, built in '89 again. Wow, those are some busy bees in the 1880s. I'll tell you, Fort Wayne, Germans and the Italians, right? Check out the top, the Antiquitech on the top here. This also falling under the category of very short time frame that this thing actually stood. There's a colorized postcard version of it, and they had an aversion to the sun, I guess, so you get all the canopies over the windows. Long gone and replaced with the modern post office. Very stark and brutal. And what are we seeing here? We see the motorized cars in the background. Are we seeing the removal of rail lines? Or are we seeing the reconstruction, the alteration? You tell me. A lot of rubble going on here. This implying that something has been taken up. And again, 1889, we have a school, multi-storied brick school. Where are all the builders coming from, folks? Concordia College, again, we'll be going right back into that same timeline. You can see the need for such decoration, I guess, in a higher learning institution. So you can envision the orphans being raised and then moving off to these colleges and being sent out into the world with the New World narrative. Becoming professionals, having families of their own, and perpetuating the new lies. This is an elementary school, apparently. What do you think? 2 bell towers? This is a modern elementary school, just to illustrate the contrast for you. Alright, school for the feeble-minded. So school for the feeble-minded. They're teaching the feeble-minded. That's interesting as well. Now this one is sort of weaving into the asylum narrative, or people that that weren't fitting into society at the time. Re-education. There you see when it still stood. This is long gone now. Could find no evidence of this standing. Take a look at the girth of the columns here on the main tower. Very high quality construction going on here. You've got towers everywhere poking off of this structure. It housed mentally handicapped young people, was the source of the overwhelming majority of those who were subjected to involuntary sterilization. Wow. Who were they sterilizing? Was it just the sterilization of the mentally handicapped, or was there something else going on here? Interesting. They're trying to eliminate inferior individuals from the breeding population. I hope you can see the web that is being woven here. An old high school, Northside High School, interesting looking structure. This gives you a good view of the quality of the construction here with the massive columns and brickwork. And this is the modern equivalent of high school, Wayne High School. Well, let's get the horse, the man on the horse. Hoagland School. Just another school with a bell tower. Nothing to see here, looking like a bit of a Bavarian feel. Take a look at that chimney up here. That's very interesting as well. What are they burning? What's going on in here? Has this been modified? Very interesting. We keep moving forward as we approach the end of the file. We'll give you a few more looks at several schools. This is also a public school. You can see the columns at the entry here on the left. And we move to a synagogue, and no doubt to cater to the Jewish community in Fort Wayne. Not the only synagogue. Here is another synagogue. Of course, they're both long gone, and this is a more modern version of the synagogue. And you can see the brickwork going on here, and perhaps this can give you a decent idea of what's required to lay bricks in such a manner. And this is only what, 10-12 feet off the ground. And we've seen brick structures that go up several stories, so you can imagine the scaffold amount needed to build those old structures. Again, put that in perspective with the 1800s. So we saw this, the Hotel Indiana. I mentioned there was a theater that was the Emboid Theater. I think modern day name is possibly the Empress, I'm not sure. Any locals out there, of course you can correct me if I'm wrong, but here's the interior, just to give you a sense of the level of detail going on here. The Lyric Theater. Again, a lot of these theaters, I suspect the performing arts was a large part of the old world existence. It makes sense. It's a large part of what it means to be human is the performing arts aspect. And of course, a lot of these get repurposed in the 20th century as motion picture viewing venues. This is telling us the Temple Theater. Interesting combination, the Temple Theater. Probably that Masonic temple. I'm not sure which one it is. I'm possibly over here on the right. Not sure. But certainly worth inclusion. And the Penn Depot train station. Loving the old train stations, part of the old world transportation. Is my suggestion, a mode of transportation that has fallen by the wayside as the internal combustion engine took over in the 20th century. But it still stands. And we get some interesting views. Very difficult, again, difficult construction to accomplish. And again, we see this, no matter where we look, we see the same things. And we'll end with the City of Fort Wayne Waterworks. They'll tell us this was built in 1931. Having a cathedral look to it, not sure why you would need to build this to look like a cathedral. But apparently, that's how they did in Fort Wayne. Thanks for watching. This has been an old world exploration. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe, hit the thumbs up button, and comment. I believe we are in the process of remembering who we really are and casting off the shackles of illusion. Until next time.